Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 121. Faced with this, I can only kill. I'm just a killer. Whenever someone needs me to commit a murder, I must be available. I have the hands of a killer. Just as Jun Xie was about to rush forward, just then he suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder. The hand of his young nephew Jun Moxie. Uncle, I was really surprised. You're a military general, a war veteran. Why would you go howling about these kinds of things to such men? Jun Moxie smiled slightly. Well? Jun Xie was somewhat puzzled. You're trying to preach justice to deaf ears? How's that useful? If they cared about life and justice, they wouldn't have committed murder so blatantly. You heard their reply. Do you still believe that they care about justice? No. In their eyes, justice is just a dispensable tool which they can discard at their discretion. As for your lecture about humanity, haha. If these men had even the slightest trace of humanity left in their body, then they wouldn't have murdered these children in such a cruel and brutal manner. Animals can be cruel because they are stupid, but these men are human beings. Do you think they are as stupid as animals? Jun Moxie's tone was flat and dull sounding. Okay. Well, then what do you suggest we do here? Jun Xie asked categorically. Well, I'd like to be decisive. Wouldn't that be a better choice? He spoke these words in Jun Xie's ears as his body leaned past his uncle's. His eyes were still fixed at Jun Xie, while his face's complexion was still as calm and warmly respectful, but his right hand moved into action. He plugged his hand straight into the mouth of one of the men, inserted it down his throat. Then, Jun Moxie tightened his grip. Crack. He crushed the man's larynx. This man was the one who had talked back to Jun Xie when the latter had preached about justice. He had strode onto the street and towards Jun Xie to teach him a lesson, but hadn't imagined that he'd end up turning into Jun Moxie's demonstration dummy. For such people, you can either simply ignore them, or... Jun Moxie pulled his hand out of the man's throat and then gracefully wiped his hand off the blood on the man's clothes. Then, he gently pushed the man back, and the man's corpse landed on the ground with a thud. Jun Moxie continued in a slow-paced tone, or if necessary, then you can kill them ruthlessly. The man's body lay on the ground, but his eyes were still open from the shock, and were now facing the hatred-filled eyes of the girl's dead body. Perhaps that man had never anticipated that this girl would end up hiring a hitman as her last act in this world. Just one damaged copper coin, that was the cost of his life. No, he's not even worth one damaged copper coin. A lot more lives would be taken before this copper coin's debt was repaid. Even though the girl must have wished her culprits dead in her last breath, she probably never thought that they would all actually die. If she had known that her last penny would hire the king of all assassins, then she would be smiling watching from the heavens right now. By providence, justice would be served to her soul. Jun Moxie had picked up her last penny, which is all the wealth she had possessed in this lifetime. It was still a major payment for a contract to this hitman, who had made his decision. The evil behind this donghua hall would die. They will all be obliterated ruthlessly. Jun Xie was still looking at his nephew, surprised at the manner in which he had just killed a man. Even though his eyes were unable to blink, he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Moxie, it's one thing to preach such ideas. But is it necessary to kill such people? Is disposing off such evil the right path to obtaining justice? Uncle, you're an honest and upright man, but I have to say this, you're too pedantic. Sounds of footsteps were approaching Jun Moxie, But he didn't bother to look back. You wish to try and reason with them? Do you wish to influence them? Even if you revealed your identity and obligated the officials to punish them, what good would that bring? I can assure you that these men would get themselves released soon enough. And they will still continue to cause more scenes like this one. Haha. Funny, huh? The other men, who had been standing at the door, saw the manner in which their companion had died, and had rushed forward roaring. Uncle, in reality, we must remember one thing: we are men of martial laws. Even though Jun Moxie was smiling, but his face was still somewhat emotionless, and his eyes seemed as deep as the oceans. He still seemed indifferent to the men who were approaching him from behind, right now. Since these men can act so boldly and brazenly, then it would seem that the Tianxiang country's laws are no longer capable of restraining them. Ha! When the law becomes the protective umbrella and the high class starts to exploit the laws for their own purposes, and when no man can punish them using the righteous method, that's the time when men like us are needed. Remember, at such a time, our military hearts must not be bounded by the shackles of the civil law, and we must turn ourselves into the sword that slaughters the wrong, combat violence with violence, and continue till we obliterate the land of these human scums. It is justice in a way. And do not worry about the ways of the heavens. The laws of men are nonsense to the gods in any case. So now, faced with this, I can only kill. Jun Moxie's face revealed a slight smile, still facing Jun Moxie. The men who were approaching from the back were almost upon him. But Jun Moxie's face was still as calm as ever. But then, he suddenly turned around in an instant, and burst past the four men in at a lightning-fast speed. Snap! Snap! Sounds followed, and he was already through them. Jun Moxie's tall figure waltzed towards the Donghua Hall's door, almost as if he was visiting a friend's house. Behind him, the bodies of the other four men looked completely intact. But then suddenly, one man's throat exposed a big and bloody hole, and then the chest of another man started to bleed. His heart had obviously been struck by a knife. The third person's crotch started to sprout blood like a fountain soon after, while the fourth man's head had been relocated to a different angle. All of them were still standing, but were no longer alive. As Jun Moxie entered the Donghua Hall, the four bodies fell to the ground. Although these ordinary men weren't able to spot Jun Moxie's actions, Jun Moxie had seen his attacks very clearly. Jun Moxie had murdered each of these men with just one move. No! He had murdered them all in just one single movement. But this one movement was so quick that none of the men were able to react to it, let alone dodge it. They were dead by command, not by fluke. A terrifying piece of skill. Could I have dodged that? Jun Moxie thought for a second. Maybe if I was at full alert, and in the best of my health, but it wouldn't be easy. Moxie's hands were too fast. He could easily kill off several Silver Xian experts in a matter of few seconds, or maybe even stronger experts. Jun Moxie suddenly woke up and realized that his nephew had gone berserk. Jun Moxie had entered the building and may run into danger inside it. If the Donghua Hall was able to act so boldly, then there could be some very powerful men inside the building. Jun Moxie quickly followed after his nephew, and practically flew into the building, only to be faced with a shocking surprise. In a span of a few seconds, while Jun Moxie was making his way to the door from the street, Moxie had managed to kill several more men. About 5 or 6 bodies lay on the floor in a disorderly manner, and each person's post-mortem analysis was identical, either a hole in the throat, or a fractured larynx bone. Jun Moxie rushed in, and finally saw Jun Moxie's silhouette enter a room in a calm and fast, but still, elegantly brutal manner. Upon entering a room and detecting a hostile presence, whether man or woman, Jun Moxie wouldn't let anyone live in front of him. The only man alive in the room, apart from Jun Moxie, would be the one man behind him, Jun Xie. No one else would be alive after Jun Moxie exited a room. The Huang Hao Hall was surely being backed by someone very powerful. And since this was a transit point for young boys and girls, this place was surely being guarded by some very powerful experts. Even though the few guards in the lobby seemed to have been quite powerful, but they were now lying dead on their faces. In fact, there were quite a few pimps in the rooms, who obviously didn't know martial arts, but Jun Moxie hadn't even left them alive. Jun Xie was simply unable to grasp the enormity of his nephew's ferocity and ruthlessness. Jun Xie, a Sky Xian expert, was backing Jun Moxie, but the nephew hadn't given his uncle any chances to attack anyone. Jun Xie was supposed to be the bodyguard, but it seemed that he was so incompetent at present that his role had been lowered to that of a sidekick or a mere spectator. Jun Moxie's face was as calm as ever, as he moved into another room. There were a few people inside this room. He broke the larynx of the first, kicked another, brought his knife up the crotch of the third, and left them all to cry as they slumped to the floor and bled to their deaths. The way forward was the way of blood and death. Boom! 3 shining silver silhouettes entered through the inner courtyard and stationed themselves across the doorway. Who are you people? How dare you cause trouble here? Do you know what this place is? The speaker seemed about 40 years old. Trouble? I'm not causing any trouble. I was just commissioned to kill these people. I don't want to cause any trouble. Jun Moxie was still smiling. The feet of the men at the door were already shaking in fear, but they started to rearrange themselves in a tactical formation nonetheless. They knew they were dealing with someone who was beyond them since there were about 40 or 50 death bodies on the floor. How dare you accept a commission for this place? The middle-aged man was obviously a sheep in a wolf's skin. Do you know who runs this place? Jun Moxie was too lazy to care about this man, so he turned around and said, "Uncle, I'm a little tired, so I'll leave these 3 men to you since you could also use the exercise. But don't take long, after all, this is the capital city, and the Imperial soldiers will be here very soon." Soldiers? Jun Xie smirked coldly, and suddenly a blue light flashed as his body flew out in an elegant but cruel manner. A Sky Xian. The 3 men weren't even able to express their shock, and their dead bodies were already flying out in different directions. A Sky Xian against 3 silver Xians. Simply unfair. They never stood a chance. Jun Xie didn't wish to go on a killing spree, but Jun Moxie's actions had already stretched this matter beyond the point of making a return, and he didn't have another option at this moment. Time was running out. So Jun Xie took the lead and started moping out the leftovers. Now he was the one who was killing the occupants of the building indiscriminatingly. But still, Jun Xie was very unhappy with his nephew's actions. While Jun Xie was raiding around the place, Jun Moxie quickly rushed into one of the locked rooms and then a bang 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 sound followed. Jun Moxie had thrown a few boxes into the courtyard. Then, he quickly and smoothly pulled a knife, and snap, pop, opened the boxes, and revealed the shining silver and the glistening gold inside these boxes. Jun Xie was astonished to see so much wealth. Just then, Jun Moxie opened another locked room and shouted, "Come out. Take some money and quickly get out of here." Go east. Suddenly, About a dozen boys and girls ran out of the room. When Jun Moxie opened the last locked room, the smell of an unspeakable horror filled his uncle's nostrils. Once Jun Xie saw the scene, his initial hesitation and disdain for Jun Moxie's actions had disappeared. This room contained a few earthen jars, and each of these earthen jars had one hole. One meek and malnourished head was popping out from each of these jars. Snap, snap, Jun Xie couldn't hold back the temptation and broke all the jars in the room. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 122. How do we handle this? The bodies in front of Jun Xie's eyes were very seriously deformed and distorted. The lengths of the bodies of these youngsters were less than 2 feet from the waist to the foot, while their arms and chests were as distorted and deformed as their lower bodies. It was difficult to tell how long these people had been contained in these jars. The only parts of their bodies that were allowed to be free from the restriction of these jars were their heads, and simply so that they could breathe and eat. These people were even made to urinate and excrete in their respective jars itself. The eyes of these people were still flashing from one point to the other, and even though their eyes seemed to be begging the two men for mercy, their mouths were unable to make any sounds, apart from a hiss. Upon a closer look, it was evident that their tongues had been cut out. This is the human swine. Most of these people were not qualified enough for other purposes, and didn't have any scope for cultivation either, so their bodies were slowly forced into deformation, and then these people would be sold off for high prices to be used as vaudeville or sideshows to circuses. Their freaky vaudevilles would be then used to win the sympathy of the spectators, and their new masters would make some money as a result. Jun Moxie gave these people one glance and then looked away. Uncle, you still believe that the masters of this place didn't deserve it? Do you still wish to talk to them? Educate them? They deserve much worse than what they got. They should have been hacked to pieces. Jun Xie was feeling shamed and enraged at the same time. Such a vicious act. What kind of a heart would command such an evil thing? Those scums, d*mn them to hell. First, when the homeless children come here, then they are preferred to be trained into killing machines, while the ones that are pretty are trained into becoming homos *zul partners and prostitutes. The ones that aren't qualified to become either are only good to become these deformed human spectacles. Everyone inside this place was a part of this work. The people here were beyond any scope of redemption. Would you still want to try? I chose to kill. And I chose to kill without any hesitation. And without any mercy. I killed them all so they couldn't do this to more people. Jun Moxie nodded and pointed towards the door. The group of boys and girls, who were initially too timid to move, finally gathered some courage and ventured into the inner courtyard, and picked up some gold from the ground. They turned around and gratefully bowed to the two men before running out of the front door. Uncle, has it crossed your mind yet? Some of these children might have been the sons and daughters of the fallen comrades that served and died under your command? After the death of their fathers, they could have been left orphaned and without any means of an income. Wouldn't they have been left completely helpless? So without any source of a living, they could have come here. Jun Moxie's words left Jun Xie's eyes red in a murderous rage. Jun Moxie may be calm, cold-blooded and ruthless, but his words were undoubtedly very logical. The Tianxiang country has several of these establishments, and even though the others may not be this big, or may not be acting so boldly, but there are several more of them. Jun Moxie sighed as he raised his eyebrows to look at the sky. The sounds of thunder were beginning to come from a distance. The boys and girls we saw here were still able to move to some extent, so I'd expect them to be able to make an escape. But then what? Do you have any ideas, being a Sky Xian expert? Jun Moxie had also heard the sounds, but was more concerned about the issue regarding these dozen or so children. Their deformities wouldn't work well in the world, but leaving them here would be equivalent to leaving them in the jaws of death. Ideas? There's no good idea for them. These people don't have tongues. Their ears have been stabbed into deafness. Their hands and feet are completely abnormal, and they will never be able to recover from these deformities. All hopes of having a normal life have been destroyed for them. While survival is the worst form of torture, a living death. Jun Moxie sighed. Do you mean? Jun Moxie was stunned. This can't be. Are you saying that since they were poor, they have now been deprived of the last shred of a dignified life? Jun Moxie turned his head. Yes, that's true. But we have to go now. The officials will be here soon. And if we don't go, then you'll have to reveal yourself. As for the survival of these children, their existence will be very painful. But some of them will continue to carry on in this world. He paused and then continued, keeping them alive by force will be the biggest pain for some. So we'll just have to wait and see for ourselves. Come on. It's getting late. Jun Moxie sighed deeply. After all, the condition of these children was too complex. But he quickly gathered his wits, hardened his heart, and followed after the fleeing Jun Moxie. The two men quickly jumped over the rear wall of the house and instantly disappeared into the general public. Just as they left, those thundering sounds crashed into the donghua hall, which was followed by noises of crashing since the soldier had finally arrived. Moxie, your temper is too cruel. Like a killer. This, you must control very carefully. Even though today you killed for a good cause, but I still find your temperament to be a little too cold. At a later time, we'll have to look into this in more depth. Jun Moxie was running right beside Jun Moxie at this moment. I committed this crime to promote good. Uncle, I do not deny that I was bloodthirsty, but I have never killed a good man, and nor will I ever hurt one. But for people like the ones at the donghua hall, I will not stop. Not until I've killed them all. And their families. I will obliterate the entire root of this evil. Jun Moxie's face was as calm as water, as he smiled coldly, but his footsteps didn't cease. The nephew and uncle duo was quite familiar with the terrain. On top of that, they were both quick-witted and agile. They quickly switched several streets and turned a few corners and managed to reach a very secluded location, while the sounds of thundering had now receded to a gradual and faint whisper behind them. You're right. Whenever we encounter an evil like this place, we must intervene. The existence of a place like this one must not be tolerated under the heaven. Jun Moxie frowned. Moxie, why did you murder all of them? Why didn't you take one alive? We could find out the mastermind behind this setup. If we had found the man behind this place, then we could have cut off the weed at its roots, which would have been the perfect solution to this problem. Uncle, do you think that shrimps like these would know about the sharks? Asking them would have been a waste of effort. Even if we got clues from them and went about investigating them, then we'd end up exposing ourselves. Jun Moxie was looking at his uncle. In fact, the person behind this will inevitably find out about this. And he isn't exactly going to sit behind a closed door and wait for us. He'll likely conduct raids throughout the country in our search. Or may even secretly send assassins after us. How would exposing ourselves work out then? Right now, we are working in the dark. And the person behind this will never know our identity. And we'll be able to do our work conveniently. There was another point. But Jun Moxie couldn't gather the nerve to say it. If we managed to trace this person, and he turned out to be a minister of the state or even a member of the royal family, then how would you deal with it? As far as this donghua hall is concerned, If the person behind this place was powerful enough to get this place from a prince, then how could we kill him off? That's also true. Jun Xie was still frowning, but now my body has almost recovered, and I will not allow such places to exist. If I ever find more, I'll destroy them as well. Third uncle, your nephew can only tell you the truth. There's a long way to go. Oh, and once we are back, you immediately arrange reliable personnel and you must ask them to follow after the people who we rescued from here, and help them to safety. If they are left to their own measures, then they probably won't be able to get very far. That's why you gave them the silver and gold. Jun Xie was somewhat puzzled. Yes, just so that they could buy some food, while the quick-witted might even be able to travel a bit. Jun Moxie smiled. We simply cannot help them in this case. I allowed them to escape, to see their respective abilities. Therefore, as a result, the ones who are resourceful will be able to go further than the others. And once they are away from the capital, we might be able to help them. Jun Moxie was in the middle of a sentence, when he suddenly stopped running and quietly said, "We have been followed for a while now. Were you able to spot him?" Jun Xie was suddenly very shocked. Someone has been following the two of us. Why didn't I notice it? I've been healing for several days now, and I've almost managed to stabilize myself to the base of Sky Xian, so I'm not just a namesake Sky Xian anymore. Most experts have the ability to track others without making their presence known. But what's the strength of this expert? And how did Moxie figure it out? After finishing the sentence, Jun Moxie continued to remain glued to his position, while his eyes were fixed on the ground below. After some time, a voice called out, "Haha! This is amazing." A deep blue light flashed, and a thin masked man appeared about a dozen meters away from them. His eyes were shining as they stared at Jun Moxie and his uncle. "How did you find me?" Jun Moxie smiled. "Everyone has a different technique, and every technique is different. But no matter who you are, you should never think that you're so great that no one can spot you. Now, why are you following us?" The man was dressed in garbs, and his mask seemed to be freshly torn from a handkerchief, so it was quite obvious that he had arranged his visible clothing in a very short period of time. "My intentions aren't malicious. I just saw the manner in which you brought justice and admired your courage, which is I decided to follow you too, out of sheer curiosity. Haha. You are talking to a fellow human. Since there was no malice intended, then we'd request that you go about your business. And please do not try to follow us again, since we do not wish to be tracked by anyone, even by a Sky Xian expert like ourselves," Jun Moxie stated bluntly. "Boy, you're not old enough to be rude to me yet. There are going to be consequences for this. I will go wherever I wish to. You think you can dictate me?" The man seemed very angry all of a sudden. After hearing his words, Jun Xie's eyes had already sharpened, while his body was already ready to move into action. "Boy? Who are you calling that?" "Old man, I'm a little reluctant to jump the knot here. But don't force me to kill you for no reason at all. Leave us, or stay here and see what happens." Jun Moxie's eyes flashed like a blue crystal as his body leaned forward, and as he raised and brought his hands to the front of his body, a flash of an azure-colored light, as deep as the color of the sea, spurred between them. "Old man, you have the guts to track us? First you stood by and watched instead of helping us out, and now you're tracking us?" Jun Moxie's eyes were full of arrogance as he looked sharply at the man again. "The Huanghua Hall invited their deaths, and so will you if you don't hit the road." Jun Moxie's eyes were brimming with confidence, almost as if he held the fate of the man's life and death in his hands. This man was already a Sky Xian expert, But it seemed as if Jun Moxie was looking at an ant. Like he could simply twist his finger and the man would die. A Sky Xian peak, the masked man was sent recoiling a few steps in surprise. The look in his eyes suddenly changed. And it seemed as if his whole body was gripped in horror. Or maybe it is a false illusion, but the inherent color of a Sky Xian peak is absolutely unique. And absolutely no one can fake it. He really is a Sky Xian peak expert at such a young age? But this can't be happening. A Sky Xian peak. And the other is also a Sky Xian expert. How can I fight the two of them alone? Shit. How did so many Sky Xian experts flood the Tianxiang city all of a sudden today? Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 123. Hiding in the Forest. Young brother. Your Sky Xian strength is indeed extraordinary. And I admit that I was mistaken. So please accept my apology for my earlier slip of tongue. A battle between two Sky Xian experts will be very destructive for the society. But as your older brother, I hope to meet you in the future again with the hope that we meet under more favorable circumstances. My intentions were pure all along. And I hope that this misunderstanding gets cleared in the time to come. The man quickly turned around and leaped. A blue light flashed and the man disappeared without a trace, rather than staying back to confront them. He didn't even look back as he bolted away from the duo. Jun Moxie finally loosened up and started sizing up Jun Moxie very carefully. Moxie, you've reached the Sky Xian. How is this even possible? Jun Moxie revealed a sly smile but didn't speak. He indicated that they needed to leave, and the two of them quickly left the scene. They kept running for a long while, and kept changing their attire on regular intervals, until they reached a small forest. Jun Moxie suddenly stopped before approaching the woods, looked back and said, I think that we are still being followed by a few people, so we shouldn't be reckless. Let's make our way home through this forest. Jun Moxie was astonished. More trackers? He had been keeping an eye on their backs as well, but hadn't discovered anything. He couldn't help but feel a sense of frustration clouding his heart. They waited for a while, but didn't hear any sounds this time. Jun Moxie smiled and said, well, I suppose we will have to take the forest route after all, but let's not leave any traces. Jun Moxie suddenly realized, Moxie, you managed to trick that man? Jun Moxie rolled his eyes, Uncle. You thought that I had reached the peak of the Sky Xian while even you are only at the base of the Sky Xian? That man didn't know anything about me, and I used that to fool him with an old trick. He simply believed it since I was able to figure out that he was following us. That's all. You made it look very realistic. Jun Moxie smiled and shook his head. If I was in his shoes, then I'm afraid that even I wouldn't have been able to figure it out. And then coupled with blue light that you flashed, I too would have definitely scuttled the other way. I didn't have a choice. This event could possibly turn into a major incident in the future. And if we're not careful, then this incident might end up hurting the entire Jun family. That man was a Sky Xian expert and I reckon that his strength was only marginally weaker to grandfather. Even though we could have beaten him, I'd say that it would have been very unwise to make enemies with such a powerful man. Jun Moxie quickly entered the forest and said, I estimate that the Huanghua Hall must be headed by a major power. And we must be very cautious. We mustn't disclose our identities unless we've already exterminated the enemy. Jun Moxie heard a slight sound, as if a few bodies had entered the forest, and turned around to take a look. Jun Moxie also paused for a second, but then stated, Uncle, pay attention to my movements, and try to keep up. Jun Moxie heard his words and wondered, Does he have more secret methods? But by this time Jun Xie had gotten accustomed to being surprised by Jun Moxie, and started following his movements closely, while paying special attention to the route which they were taking. He didn't figure it out immediately, but soon started to realize Jun Moxie's genius, although Jun Moxie was walking at a very high speed. His body wasn't disturbing any of the forest's elements. His left hand was always in front of his body, while his right was stationed behind. Whenever he'd have to pass through branches of shrubs or trees, his left hand would gently brush aside the leaves and branches while his body would quickly advance through, and his tailing right hand would return the objects to its initial position. Not even a single dried leaf would fall as he would move through the forest. And since he was practically tiptoeing his way through the thickets of the forest, he was practically leaving no traces at all. Jun Moxie was so cautious that he hadn't even trampled on the bugs in the forest. He'd place his steps very cautiously, and was even managing to conceal his figure behind the trees as he moved forward. One of his hands was always at a higher position, while the other was stationed at a lower altitude in order to maintain his balance, and it seemed that he was always ready to attack or defend, if needed. All these movements seemed very natural and seamless, but his pace was so fast that it was obvious that these movements were happening instinctively. Simultaneously, he had even reduced his breathing to a minimum in order to minimize and eliminate his body's odor. These set of actions were so advanced and well calculated that practically no expert would ever be able to track him down in this forest. Even when Jun Moxie stepped on a dried branch, his foot still wouldn't make a sound. Once Jun Moxie passed by a bird, which was in the middle of a song, and normally these birds are so sensitive to human presence that they stand interrupted and fly away. But Jun Moxie moved so stealthily that the bird didn't even notice him as he moved past it. Jun Xie was completely astonished. As a Sky Xian expert and a military general, he had previously campaigned perennially, which is why he knew it very clearly that Jun Moxie's expertise was unparalleled. And Jun Moxie wasn't even at Silver Xian yet. Jun Moxie's expertise seemed to have been molded into his blood and instincts by some strange form of unknown training. So much so that even if a supreme divine Xian peak expert undertook a rigorous training, then even the said person might not be able to achieve his expertise. Such expertise and skill was practically impossible to attain. Even though Jun Xie was studying his movements very carefully, and was trying to mimic them to the best of his ability, he was still failing to achieve the same result. Jun Xie would look back from time to time and would find that he had trampled on a twig, or had left some trace which could be used to track him, and felt a little shamed by his incompetence. Even the uprooting of a single leaf can lead them straight to us. Although these traces may not be very conducive, and are generally found everywhere in such forests, but we must still be very careful since we are faced a very strong opposition here. Jun Moxie said in a profound manner. Even though Jun Moxie and Jun Xie might be poles apart in their ideologies, but neither of the two men took anything for granted. But otherwise, Jun Xie was very different from Jun Moxie since he was very orthodox, had a very strong sense of justice. He was chivalrous, warm-hearted, courageous, and righteous. All these traits had earned him a lot of love and respect in the world. Jun Moxie, on the other hand, was of course a trained assassin, but was still a man on principles. Take this case for example. Although he had decided to undertake the task of sorting out the donghua hull, he only did so because the copper coin fell out of the girl's body. If that copper coin hadn't found its way to Jun Moxie's feet, then wouldn't have gone on a killing spree. But still, the basic moral values of these two men were still very different from each other's. Even though the characters of this uncle and nephew duo were diametrically opposite, Jun Moxie still appreciated and admired people like his uncle. But even then, he wouldn't ever agree with the ideas of such people. Because, according to him, even though such people deserve to be respected and admired, their strong sense of justice can sometimes limit their thought process, which can often lead to failures, and maybe even death. And death was too big a price to pay for righteousness. This predominant sense of justice was Jun Wuyi's biggest fundamental flaw, his Achilles heel. According to Jun Moxie, these things could be used by others to set up traps. And men like Jun Wuyi were likely to fall into these traps. Jun Moxie had been constantly trying to instill some new ideologies into Jun Wuyi's head, but knew that he would never be able to completely change his uncle's mindset. However, he hoped that it would help his uncle in making the more logical decisions in some cases. Jun Wuyi had been studying Jun Moxie's actions very closely ever since he had started to heal, and had found that even though Jun Moxie's expertise was peerless, his methods were very strange, and appeared as if he had been taught these skills by an external source. He was constantly trying to learn new skills from Jun Moxie, and wasn't feeling ashamed in any way to submit to his nephew's superiority. But still, it was difficult for him to come to terms with it. But either way, Jun Wuyi's mind was at peace. Jun Moxie had brought his uncle outside the Jun family's house in the hope of relieving him of his boredom, and had even thought of taking him to the Spirit Fog Lake for a casual trip. But then the incident with the girl happened, and it turned out that his uncle had an inherent hatred toward such establishments. In fact, Jun Moxie could tell that if the Jun family had known about this earlier, then they would have taken a stance to eliminate such places. So at the moment, it didn't seem like a very good idea to take his uncle to a brothel for a visit. Although Jun Wuyi was very quiet at present, if Jun Moxie suggested visiting a brothel, then the man would probably make a meal out of him. As a result, Jun Moxie had already given up his initial idea. But anyway, he had still managed to accomplish the desired result since his uncle had gotten some good exercise, and had also been involved in some exciting action after being restricted to a wheelchair for a decade. "Uncle, I got you into trouble during your first outing after such a long time," Jun Moxie stated as he walked. But he had deliberately slowed down his pace now, so Jun Wuyi could get a better look at his movements. These skills might come in handy later on in life. "I had purchased a huge piece of metal some time ago. Could you help me in cutting it to shape?" Earlier, Jun Moxie had procured a mysterious metal, but he hadn't been able to figure it out yet. The metal was extremely solid and hard, but physically it was still very lightweight, and on top of that, couldn't be melted either. Given his current ability, Jun Moxie knew that it was hopeless to try and cut the metal himself, but knew that his uncle might be able to do it since he was Sky Xian expert, and had a lot of aura still left inside his body which would be able to provide him temporary assistance. "Sure, I will," Jun Wuyi promised in reply. His body had almost recovered completely at this time, and his body had a huge amount of surplus energy since the residual of the herbs were still burning inside his body, which was increasing his self-confidence. "What shape do you want?" "I'll cut it to any shape you desire, haha." Jun Wuyi seemed awfully cheerful at the moment. Little did the Sky Xian expert knew that he'd have to put in 2 days of hard labor, expend a huge amount of energy, while also mustering his entire Sky Xian power to fulfill his promise and delivering the shape which Jun Moxie desired. This task would leave him half dead and miserably exhausted before it was over. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 124. The Formidable Practice of Habit. Jun Xie worked around the clock over the next few days to finish Jun Moxie's task, and managed to finish casting the metal to the desired shape. Even though the metal was only to be casted into a very small knife. But since Jun Moxie required the knife's balance to be very precise, since he intended to use for personal tasks, the task became quite arduous. Jun Moxie participated in the task, same as his uncle, but didn't seem very exhausted at the end of it, while Jun Xie was so exhausted that his thighs had swollen from the effort that he had put in, even though he was a very strong and burly man. Moxie, I wonder why I've never seen you practicing your skills. Jun Xie was quite surprised. This arduous task, which had been dauntingly difficult for the Sky Xian expert, had seemingly been a child's play for his nephew. On top of that, Jun Xie had never seen his nephew practice his Xian Qi, which was only making him more curious. Practice? Jun Moxie looked at him in surprise. Uncle, I practice all the time. How have you not noticed it yet? Jun Xie couldn't help but stare at him with widened eyes in astonishment. Uncle, do you really believe that only controlling your breathing while sitting cross-legged motionlessly and tempering your Xian Qi is the only way of so-called practicing? Jun Moxie's tone was clearly expressing his amazement. I think that we can practice our skills at all times. While eating, while talking, while fighting, walking, standing or running, and even when we aren't doing anything at all. Even while we are sleeping, we can still practice in our dreams. One day has 20 hours, and I don't even waste a single minute of it. Even though we are talking to each other at this moment, I'm still practicing. So instead of asking me when I practice, shouldn't you ask when I don't practice? Jun Moxie smiled. Even now? Jun Xie's eyes widened further. When walking we can practice our balance and hone our senses of vigilance on our feet. We can also to exercise our hearing ability and our eyes, and our body's sensitivity to our surroundings. As long as you are determined, you can practice all the time. Jun Moxie seemed quite serious about it. While fighting, it is important for your mind to be active, and you can temper your mind to be calm while you're undertaking a frustrating task. It's important to practice such skills to the point where they start happening automatically. Otherwise you might be unable to use your skills properly at a critical juncture. Which is why I practice all the time. Do you understand my meaning? Even though Jun Moxie made perfect sense, but Jun Xie's eyes were still gaping at him, and it seemed as if they would pop out of their sockets. If I interpreted your words correctly, then you intend to say that when you're dodging an incoming attack, you're not trying to move aside wholeheartedly and your mind is not in a state of chaos? Jun Xie gasped. Isn't that impossible? How's it impossible to tune your mind to that? Jun Moxie sounded helpless. All you need to do is melt your skills into your instincts, and make such actions a habit of your nature. If you can do that, then you need not think, or even intend to carry out an action. Won't it just happen by itself in this case? Jun Xie was dumbstruck. But he was finally beginning to realize something. His own nephew was a freak of nature. When a normal man like Jun Xie is confronted with a freak like his nephew, being uncomfortable and confused is only a natural human reaction. Such kinds of bizarre practice methods could drive a person mad. In fact, for ordinary men, even mentioning such methods was an act of madness. How could practicing Xian Qi be this easy? There's no need to deliberate while carrying out an action if it's molded into your instincts. So to speak, while we are walking, we can look out for the things that lay ahead of us and what we might be stepping on. And while we talk, we can still use our nose to identify the smells in the air. This is why I was able to get through the forest with so much ease. My mind was constantly distinguishing my surroundings. and everything was happening instinctively. Jun Moxie smiled leisurely. If practice can be done in this manner also, then why shouldn't we do it? Just because you can't focus your entire attention on your practice doesn't mean that you can't practice at all. This might seem very difficult in the beginning, but you'll get used to it over time. And when that time comes, these actions will become your habit, and as time will pass, they will be molded into your instincts, and eventually you'll even stop noticing the difference between actions and instinctive reactions. It's really that simple. Jun Moxie smiled. Jun Xie was quite amused by his nephew's ideas. No wonder that you are always so dull and indifferent, since your mind is always analyzing everything. It tends to appear as if you're taking everything lightly, including your own life. Well, it seems that you're not indifferent at all, but you're just always analyzing everything with an open mind. Jun Xie was finally beginning to understand. In fact, Jun Xie had been unwittingly mimicking Jun Moxie's methods. And now that he suddenly came to a halt, he started to feel as if his whole body was being gripped with a sense of fatigue. He was well aware that Jun Moxie's body's xian qi was nothing compared to his own, but still his nephew showed no signs of tiredness. He couldn't help but admit that this habit was indeed a formidable force. Previously, upon their return from their adventure, a servant had come to report a few messages. Du Guwu had come looking for the young master. Tang Yuan had also come looking for the young master. The young master had also received an invitation from a few other people, including 3 invitations from His Majesty's 3 sons, while another 2 nobles had invited him over for dinner. Coincidentally, a generalissimo, 2 nobles and 3 princes wished to see him at the same time. Suddenly, if 3 of His Majesty's sons were interested in making friends with the dandy Jun Moxie, then this really couldn't be a coincidence. Jun Xie looked at his nephew profoundly and said, Moxie, from now on, you can make decisions on your own. You understand our circumstances quite well, and your grandfather and I will no longer restrict your actions. He paused for a moment and said, We believe in you. Jun Moxie's actions had borne excellent results in quick succession, and as a result, he had managed to create a formidable reputation in his uncle's mind. So much so that Jun Xie was even beginning to admire his nephew, which is why he had decided to give Jun Moxie a free hand. He had realized that even though Jun Moxie might seem indifferent to everything, he was always cautiously trying to concentrate on one thing. No matter what you do, avoid trouble. And like his bizarre practice methods, his sense of wariness had been embedded into his instincts by now. So basically, if anyone tried to misuse Jun Moxie's influence, then that man would end up having a bad day. Thank you very much, uncle. Jun Moxie's reply sounded very earnest. Jun Moxie. You kid. What kind of weird nuisance did you put in that wine? The 7 of them are still unconscious. If anything happens to them, I swear on my life, I will tear you apart. Du Guwu was so enraged that he jumped off his armchair the moment Jun Moxie walked into the room. The valiant general had turned into a worried father overnight. The 7 sons of the Du Gu family were still asleep ever since he had brought them home from the Jun family's residence in a state of sleep. He had tried everything to dissipate the effects of the alcohol, tea, vinegar, soy sauce. But nothing had worked. Finally, he ordered the physician to carry out a medical treatment, but even that didn't bear any result. If the 7 of them weren't snoring thunderously in their sleep, an evident proof that the 7 of them were sleeping under the effect of the alcohol, then the general might have lost his mind, and may have already attacked General Jun Tian's only grandson. All 7 had remained unconscious ever since they had consumed the wine, which was practically an unprecedented incident. Du Guwu This little boy is sitting in front of you upon accepting your invitation and hasn't said anything rude to you. Then why would you scold me in such a manner? You came to my family's house. And you stirred trouble with my grandfather. Then you wantonly caused damage to our property. And didn't even apologize. Nor did you reimburse for the damages with even a single penny from your pocket. On top of that, your boys stole my wine. And yet you still accuse me of falsehood? Is there no justice left in this world anymore? Jun Moxie tried his best to mimic his father's tone and style of speech. And they still haven't woken up? Well, I can easily fix that. Jun Moxie was already laughing up his sleeve. I know how to wake them from their slumber. He lazily retreated into his armchair and raised his arms and legs up. Shall I prepare the medicine? They are obviously still under the effect of the wine, and I can give you a few shots of the cure. But you'll have to pay me some money. Money. Debauchee's face was going black and it seemed like he hadn't understood Jun Moxie's intentions. The Jun family has a reputation of being very honest and upright in the public eye. Not wrongly so either. But why did their only heir have to be such a money grubber? He's so blinded by money that he has even resorted to blackmailing and wrongdoings. 1 jar of wine for 25 million taels of silver. He is more ruthless than the emperor. How much money do you need this time? You already ripped me off the last time. But you better not think of it again. Debauchee gnashed his teeth as he eyed Jun Moxie covetously. 70,000 taels of silver should be enough this time. The raw materials will cost a lot of money. So I'd say that it is a fair trade. And very affordable too, a genuine bargain. Jun Moxie stretched the 5 fingers of his left hand, and 2 of his right, to indicate the price of his services. Oh, lucky me. Just 70,000 taels? You know your hands aren't big enough to carry so much silver yet. Debauchee taunted. Don't worry, I'll use my toes if I have to. Jun Moxie grinned. I'll go and get the raw materials. But you need to pay up right now. I don't give out credit. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 125. A new headache. Debauchee's face had gone black with rage. He threw the money on the table, but couldn't help feeling a little oppressed. It is hard to imagine that an honest and upright man like Jun Xie's son would turn out to be such a rascal. Jun Moxie got up and walked out of the room. He returned a while later, with several other men, each of whom was carrying a small jar of wine. Well, we need to stuff their stomachs with this wine until they throw up and vomit out the other wine. Mixing 2 different wines can be a very effective cure in some cases. Are you playing with me? Debauchee was even more enraged now. You think that I haven't already tried this? I had their stomachs stuffed with all kinds of wines, but they didn't vomit. How would you know what's right? They got drunk because they stole my secret wine. I'm the only one who knows that wine's potency and abilities. They drank so much of it and have been very badly intoxicated by it. It's only due to their extraordinary physique and high xian qi that they are still alive. If an average person drank that much of my wine, then they would have already died from its intoxication. But in order to dissipate the wine's effects, you first need to know its functioning. Even if you forced another wine down their throats, and tried to make it react to the wine which is already present inside their stomachs, then it may not bear the desired result since the nature of each wine is very unusual and different from the other. I brewed that wine myself, and only I know its true blend, and the effects of that blend. So, only I can cure its hangover. Do you understand it now? In order to apply common sense, you still need to have some basic knowledge and experience. right? General? Jun Moxie's reply and tone were merciless. Even if what you say is true, it does not take 7 jars of wine. They didn't take so much of your secret wine in the first place. You're obviously blackmailing me. Debauchee didn't really understand the nature of the wine's intoxication, but was still trying to use his general knowledge on the subject to accuse Jun Moxie while tactfully trying to avoid the real issue which was bothering him. These wine jars cost nearly 12,000 taels each. That's too much. I haven't even started selling my wine publicly yet, so this is actually my first sale. Jun Moxie started collecting the money, so basically, I'm giving you this for a very cheap price. And it may not be this cheap next time. Even though Debauchee's face had become even blacker with rage at this moment, he turned around and left since he was afraid that he might end up losing his temper. He really didn't want to beat this kid up. He was the young master of the Jun family after all. It was reported that you were teasing the Debauchee family's girl. Old man Jun smiled as he squinted his eyes and readjusted his gaze to look at his grandson. Grandpa. No. I don't know that savage girl is saying. I don't know why the Debauchee family is claiming that I bullied their daughter. She has been teasing me. Okay? Jun Moxie sighed. Almost as he felt wronged by the accusation. This is ridiculous. What's so ridiculous about this? It's simple. That girl fancies you. The old man revealed a cunning smile. If that girl didn't have a crush on you, then she wouldn't be acting so naughty. Debauchee. That old B** starred. He probably knew this all along. And is just trying to play dumb in front of everyone. He thought that I won't be able to see through his scheme. What scheme? Jun Moxie was genuinely very surprised. He really hadn't spotted anything unusual about this matter. Debauchee fancies you like the little fool she is. But the Debauchee family will be reluctant in making you their son-in-law. On the other hand, even the king will not allow you to marry someone from the Debauchee family. Which is quite obvious. Right? Jun Xie stroked his beard. Of course I understand. If two such powerful military families of the Tianxiang Empire were unified in a bond of marriage, then the royal family will feel threatened. Jun Moxie nodded. He was finally beginning to understand some parts now. No. You still don't. Jun Xie seemed a bit gloomy that his grandson was unable to see through such a basic scheme. The Debauchee family is just trying to prepare for the worst. If Debauchee tries to commit suicide over not being able to marry you, then the Debauchee family will try to use it and will try to take it out on us. And when that time comes, they will need more reasons to attack us. When this happens, the two families will be pointing swords at each other. But that will just be to deceive the public. Do you get it? Even though His Majesty will not want the Debauchee family's pampered daughter to be married into the Jun family, but it will still be a better scenario than a complete falling out between the two families. And at that time, in order to prevent a huge internal strife in the kingdom, His Majesty himself will turn into a matchmaker for the two of you. Understand it now? Debauchee sent his 7 pups here to create trouble. That was his way of creating an alibi for stirring trouble later on. That old moron must be feeling very proud right now. That old B** starred thinks that he's too smart and everyone else is a fool. Didn't he even once think that the emperor is a lot smarter than him? What a pig. If we don't prepare for this in advance, then we might end up taking a lot of damage. Jun Moxie repeatedly uttered, as listened to this, dumbstruck. It's surprising that these old guys have so much time to formulate such weird schemes. At this rate, that can't happen. Old man Jun looked at his grandson and winked. You can't marry her. Whatever you did with her, without being married to her, is fine. But I will not allow that old B***starred to marry off his granddaughter to my grandson. Jun Xie was practically sweating bullets. When the grandfather is leading with such examples, then there's no point in blaming the grandson. We need to put this matter off early. Otherwise, this will cause a big headache later on. I can't believe that he thought that I'd let him marry his granddaughter to my grandson. Grandfather Jun seemed a bit out of tune, the first sign of you rising to power. And everyone wants to befriend you. Even the three princes are fighting with each other to curry favors with you. I can't help. I'm just naturally handsome. Jun Xie touched his chin, feeling a bit impressed with himself. Of course you are very handsome. Why wouldn't you be? You're a son of the Jun family. If Jun Xie was pleased with his looks, then Jun Zhangtian was practically on the verge of narcissism. But that doesn't mean that this kind of things should happen. You probably had a few flings with a few girls along the way, but this will be slightly more difficult to deal with. And as far as those three princes are concerned, I tell you, those three are a bad deal. Once they stick to you, you won't be able to shake them off. And don't think that you're smarter than them. They will betray you whenever it suits them. Understand? Well, I understand. In fact, my real intention is. Jun Xie was about to give an idea to prepare for the uncertainties. Oh, just don't, okay? Your private affairs do not concern me. But just keep the Jun family's name out of it. Old man Jun promptly waved his arm to interrupt Jun Xie, and then left the room with his hands folded behind his back. Jun Xie was quite angry with this situation, especially since he wasn't allowed to express his opinion. He had struggled a long time to create his new image, and he was suddenly left looking like a fool all over again. The young master of the Jun family shook his head and made his way towards the courtyard where Fatty Tang was anxiously waiting for him. It had been a long time since they had last seen each other. Jun Xie had gotten busy with healing his uncle, and then helping him during his physical rehabilitation, post which he had accompanied his uncle for a tour, and it had almost been a month since he had seen his friend now. However, he had thought about the meatball's well-being a few times though. But all that sentiment vanished the moment he saw the fatty again. That huge meatball had been constantly asking a little Lolita, who was looking after the guests in the courtyard, when will he be back? Why hasn't he returned yet? What? And then he had also asked, he didn't die during his trip, right? The little maid at the reception was quite scared of the seemingly grim and dejected body language of the big fat man. She was afraid that if the man accidentally or intentionally tumbled over and fell on top of her little body, then given her small physical structure, she would inevitably get crushed to death underneath him. Hey fatty, what are you doing here? Jun Xie was holding the 3 invitations in his hand. Although he felt as if he was holding 3 bombs. The 3 brothers weren't on good terms with each other. And since all 3 of them wished to see him at the same time, then something was definitely going on. He was already having a headache, and then this huge fat meatball of a body made it even worse. Third young master. You came back. You have to help me out. Brother, I don't want to live. You don't know what happened to your little brother. Tang Yuan's eyes and nose were leaking. You have to help me out this time. Or I'll just. You just what? Eat till you die? Quickly tell me what happened. And wait. First tell me why I should help you. Jun Xie was sitting on a chair opposite to his friend. He looked closely and figured that this might be a little serious. Fatty, you seem in a really bad shape. What happened? Did you lose your wife again? Balls. Tang Yuan cursed out loudly. You think I'm stupid? Okay then. It's time for my sleep now. Jun Moxie playfully started to get up from his seat. No. Don't go. You don't know what my grandpa is doing to me. You have to help me out. Or I will die for sure. Tang Yuan hastily barred his way. Quickly tell me your problem. I'm very busy. I don't have time for your silly games. Jun Moxie raised his line of sight. Oh, woo. Painful. Third young master, they are sending me for castration at the palace. Woo. Tang Yuan started crying again. What? Your grandfather wants you to become an imperial eunuch? Your grandfather still loves you, right? Jun Moxie seemed quite amused, and sat up straight as he stared his friend with big round eyes. Ah yes. He wants me to become a eunuch. Tang Yuan's chest welled up like a mountain, as if there are no other jobs in the palace apart from this. Of course there are other jobs in the palace. But none of them will suit you. You're barely good enough for this one as it is. Jun Moxie rubbed his chin and shrugged his shoulders, before breaking into a provocative laughter. What do you mean? You think that I'm only good enough to be a eunuch? Are you trying to piss me off? Even though Tang Yuan felt quite aggrieved and indignant, he couldn't find more tears to express it properly. All right. Then why don't you tell me about your other qualities? What would you be good at? Jun Moxie ignored the fatty's anger and continued to laugh lightly. I have a lot of qualities. Such as. The fatty thought for a long time, but couldn't come up with anything. For example, you could help your grandfather by forging a good relationship with the generals of the Mu Rong army. Jun Moxie realized that the man was already quite embarrassed and decided that he shouldn't tease the man any further. So he smiled and gave his fat friend a hint. Yes. That's really it. The fatty's gloomy face suddenly lit up. I didn't get it earlier when my grandfather explained it. He said that he had good relationships inside the imperial palace. At all levels. And even with the man who carries out the medical examination of the eunuchs. So basically, he will set things up. And wants me to. Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 126. Unambitious. Why are you reacting so swiftly and decisively? Your father learned a great deal there. Jun Moxie had always been quite amazed with the fatty's father. When the big man was overseeing the command of his guards, all enemies were sure to die. But his father was going to take charge of a different position now. And Tang Yuan could soon get his job someday. Amazing. This is really distressing. Third young master. My father and my grandfather were serious about this. They are going to start training me. They want me to start at the base level, and once I've mastered this level and have cultivated myself, then my father will choose an appropriate time and will redeploy my position. I'll keep rolling from one department to the other. And finally I'll have to inherit my father's seat. In time. Do you understand? Fatty's face was hanging from his body like a dried-out melon. In other words, you will become the head of the Tang family one day? Jun Moxie stared blankly at this amusing fatty in disbelief. Head of a family? Master of one of the biggest families of the Tianxiang Empire? Who's going to believe this? Well, I don't know where that old man popped out of. But he said that he's an old friend of my grandfather from 40 years ago. The fatty continued, 4D*MN decades, and he hasn't written a single letter. And now that the Tang family is on the rise, he's suddenly here to talk friendship. What kind of a friend is he? But Grandpa was quite happy about it. Stop. How's that relevant to you? Jun Moxie was beginning to get another headache now. This fatty just keeps jumping discussions. He doesn't make any sense logically. What is wrong with him? How's this irrelevant? After that old man waltzed in, he picked out Tang gun, Tang Bao and Tang Gua and tested them out for Sky Xian potential. After he was done with the three of them, he told my grandfather that the three of them have potential to enter into the Sky Xian level and that he'll take them as apprentices. He also promised that he'll train them into the Earth Xian in less than a decade. My grandfather was so happy that he took the offer, saying that he is the proud grandfather of 4 grandchildren. Tang Yuan sighed. Do you understand it now? I still didn't get it. All I could make out was that the Tang family will probably have 3 Earth Xians in less than a decade, which can only be a good thing for the family. But what's this have to do with your side of the story? What are you trying to say? Jun Moxie was looking at his friend blankly. Third young master, you're usually so clever, why are you acting so stupid today? The 3 elder brothers of mine are going after their master. So what happens to the family now? Someone will have to inherit the responsibility. And am I not the only one remaining? Families like our, whether big or small, have one thing in common: the person who is in charge of the family must make sure that the family keeps growing. In order to ensure that, the leader of the family must train suitable candidates, men and women, and then turn them into loyal followers. During this period, the old generation, which is already loyal to the family, helps out and trains these people into successful Xian experts. Then, they in turn train the next generation and cultivate their powers, and this keeps happening from one generation to the next, until the family is gradually entrenched into the roots of the empire, so much so that even the royal family doesn't provoke these super families. And all this is done so we can light incense sticks in front of the portraits of the ancestors. All such families are inevitably struggling in that direction. And me, I'm not even remotely affected by such things. Do you understand my pain now? Tang Yuan sighed. I don't understand AD*MN thing. You fat fart. Jun Moxie replied contemptuously. Your grandfather is training you to be the head of the family, and you'll get all the glories of life. How's that related to those 3? They have talent for cultivation, and isn't that going to help you in the future? So basically, you're just trying to show off, right? You know how much struggle is there inside a family for the position of the family's head. Brothers wage wars against each other, they fight, and sometimes the family breaks up in discord. You're getting all of it, and without the slightest of struggle. I do not want any of it. I do not want to be a minister. How many times do you want me to say it? The fatty cried out in anger. I'm not showing off. I don't want the responsibility of bureaucracy. Traps and deception at every step. Do you think that I'm cut out for this? Or even good enough to endure it? I do not have any of those skills. I just want a free and leisurely life. I just want to be an unaffected dandy. I've never wanted to shoulder these responsibilities. Do you understand? The fatty's saliva was sprouting out in all directions as the fatty vented out his anger. You don't want to be a minister. You don't want to be the head of the family. And you don't any responsibilities. Then what do you want to do with your life? Jun Moxie frowned. Third young master, I don't mind when other people ask this. But you're not other people, you're my confidant. You know me. You know what makes your brother happy, right? Tang Yuan raised his gaze, and it seemed as if looking at his imaginary future brother. I only want money. The sound of other people's gold and silver falling into my pocket is what makes me happy. Really happy. Jun Moxie was silent for the next 5 seconds. What kind of a person is he? Why am I friends with him? Jun Moxie must have been his soulmate. But not me. Although I am Jun Moxie, but I'm not really Jun Moxie. I just want to do business. That's my favorite thing in life. My family has a business. And I just want to inherit that. I want to overtake that business. And once I've done that, I'll turn it into the biggest business house of the entire continent. Tang Yuan was waving his thick arms at this point, which were even wider than Jun Moxie's thighs. That's easier said than done. You must try to convince your father of this first. Jun Moxie was feeling a bit strange. As far as he could tell, the fatty would make a formidable businessman. In fact, that was the only thing that he'd be good at. But Fatty's father wouldn't understand it, let alone endorse it. Really? It seemed as if Tang Yuan was about to start crying again, but he couldn't find the tears this time. He took off his robe and revealed his upper body. He turned about to show his backbone to his friend, while his face had turned red with anger and humiliation. See, third young master. This was the result of convincing my father. Tang Yuan sighed as he showed his back to Jun Moxie. Well, painful. Jun Moxie was stunned to see that the fatty's back was dyed purple with almost a dozen bruise marks. And look at this. The fatty turned around and pointed to his belly. There were 5 or 6 foot marks on his fat belly. Then he put on his robes again and stated bitterly, I will not show you my ass. But that's much worse off. I can barely take a dump. You've been beaten up like cattle. Ah! Jun Moxie was dumbstruck. It seems that you can't do anything about this. So you might as well not try. Since your father is already clearing your way to the top, I believe that you won't have many issues. And you'll be able to cope with the pressure quite easily. Indeed. Even if I was willing to find a solution for you, I don't think I'd be able to do much. No matter what we think, your father will not listen to any of it. I advise that you honestly try to become a minister for now, and then succeed him to his seat for now. Jun Moxie was silent all of a sudden. What kind of heartless acts are people willing to do for power? He didn't even go easy on his own son. Tang Yuan is being forced to reap where he hasn't sown. He's obviously going to be very reluctant about it. But what kind of a man is his father? Is he even more evil than me? Would I have been able to do something like this? I'm not going to do that. I would rather die. Tang Yuan stood up vehemently and raised his hand to his chest as he chanted his vow with a firm look in his eyes. I will not take over the house master's seat. I will not become a minister. In this life, I will only make money. Plop. Jun Moxie stared blankly as the chair, which was previously glued to the fatty's buttocks, finally dropped to the floor. He had never seen a clown like this one before. Not in this world. Nor in the previous one. I won't stray from my ideals. And all of my old man's possession and incentives will not deviate me from my path. The fatty looked quite resolute, and I will fool that eunuch. Zhu Lao. Eunuch Xiao Lao, an idea popped up into Jun Moxie's mind as he said the word. Tang Yuan would make a very good businessman. But his family will not allow him to do business. But if I helped him out, then we could start a partnership together, and we could amass a fortune over time. With this thought in mind, Jun Moxie suddenly looked at Tang Yuan again, almost as if he was staring at a priceless commodity. What are you doing? Why are you eyeing me like that? I'm a guy. Stay away from me. The fatty seemed afraid and backed off a few steps. Ah. Jun Moxie's internal organs were sent tumbling at the thought, and he barely managed to control his vomit. Well, I don't want to listen to more of your crap. You said that you'll fool that eunuch Zhu Lao. How? Jun Moxie rolled his eyes. Eunuch Zhu Lao was quite close to the emperor, which is why Jun Moxie estimated that the man must be an expert. Eunuch Zhu Lao's given name was Zhu, which is quite funny. But the man is known to people like Jun Zhantian and Dugawudi. and visits them quite often. Thus, it can only be estimated that the man must be quite an expert himself, and was certainly not an ordinary man. That castrated old fool is in charge of checking the body of the eunuchs, and is known to play around with them a lot. Fatty grimaced, "Brother, even though my body is a little fat, but I'm perfectly healthy, and I don't have any diseases. So I'll pass for sure, that is my main concern." The fatty patted his belly with a sense of pride. "I heard that the other guy, Mu Rongqian Jun's medical examination was very brutal. And that old fool twisted his P***NIS for a long time." Mu Rongqian Jun was pale after the examination. In fact, he was seen walking wide-legged for the next 2 weeks. The fatty seemed to be deriving entertainment from the rumor. "Are you still feeling good about this? I think you should immediately start practicing walking like that." Jun Moxie burst into laughter again, as he funnily stared at the fat meatball, trying to imagine how he'd look in the situation. Yes. Yes. Third master. You have to help me. I don't want to walk wide-legged. Tang Yuan immediately realized the gravity of his own impending fate. Medical examination. Will he check your body and **ked? Jun Moxie thought for a while, and came up with an idea. He extended his finger and made a poking gesture. "Will he also check your backside?" Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 127. A breakthrough within sight. Medical examination. Is he going to strip you an **ked? Jun Moxie pensively held out his finger and made a poking gesture as he winked. "Is he also going to check your ass? I've heard that they even check your anus." Tang Yuan replied in a gloomy tone, "Right now I'm not going to be able to pass that exam." The fatty was standing on his feet, and one could tell that the man was quite scared of what was coming his way. "Third young master, I have heard that the eunuchs are asked to strip an **ked completely. Gives me the creeps. Really and then they put all kinds of things inside your body And now I have the creeps." Jun Moxie scratched his arms, which were studded with goosebumps. If something was so terrifying that even the king of all assassins was terrified of it, then just imagine how horrifying the situation must be. "So is there no solution to this?" "Brother, I'm counting on you." The fatty looked at his friends with a hint of hope in his eyes. "There is. But you have to go to the palace as soon as possible for the checkup, and I'll help you prepare for it myself." So. Jun Moxie smiled and winked, and then broke into a laugher. "I don't understand. What do you mean?" Tang Yuan was standing with a blank look on his face. "You don't understand? I can't have you working at the palace, okay? I was thinking about doing business with you, as a partner. Over time, both of us could make a fortune together." Jun Moxie smiled as he continued to observe Tang Yuan's face. "Do business together?" Tang Yuan's face lit up, and he blinked twice in quick succession. "Third young master, you're like my second parent. You're like my... Get out of here. You won't be able to live up to your father's expectation." "But what's your father going to do once his own actions lead to your disqualification?" Jun Moxie stretched his legs and kicked the fatty in his buttocks. Tang Yuan clutched his buttocks as he grimaced in pain. "Nothing. As long as the royal decree goes against me, father will not kill me. I hope. So you're saying that if I fail and use my father as the scapegoat?" Ha 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 ha. Tang Yuan's body language changed the moment he realized that he was out of danger. Jun Moxie was laughing so hard that all the sorrowful thoughts of his heart seemed to have washed away. This fatty is one heck of an amusing clown. He was still laughing when he suddenly recalled Tang Yuan's earlier words. Tang Wanli's friend from 40 years ago had suddenly popped out of nowhere. And the man was a super expert. He paused in the middle of his laughter. A super master? How could this be? Does this mysterious occurrence have anything to do with the news about the Xian Corps? But so quickly? If so, then there's a storm coming towards the Tianxiang country. Suddenly the qi inside Jun Moxie's body started working automatically. Jun Moxie could clearly feel the strength of the qi which was flowing through his body's meridians at the moment, and could tell that it was beginning to reach the point of saturation now. The originally thin and weak flow of energy had now transformed into a strong and turbulent current, and he was able to carry out his normal physical movements with much greater ease at present. Jun Moxie's heart was carrying a very strange feeling, which had no logical explanation, but he felt that once this energy reaches the saturation point, then he might be able to open the second layer of the pagoda. So this time, Jun Moxie didn't ignore it. He started spending his entire time in circulating this energy throughout his body, and ended up spending the next 2 days in promoting his state. After he was done, Jun Moxie was pleasantly surprised to realize that not only was the pagoda capable of absorbing his body's aura, but could now also assimilate aura from the outside world. Only a little amount though. But this was still indicative of a major step in forward direction. Jun Moxie had big expectations from the second layer of the Hongjun Pagoda, since the first layer was only the basics of its foundation. If the basics were so amazing, then the second layer. In the recent days, the atmospheric temperature had dipped, and the autumn winds were rustling brazenly throughout the city. Dried-out yellow leaves were falling from the sky, but Jun Moxie was spending his entire time inside his room, practicing. He was busy absorbing energy from his surroundings, and was trying to feed it to the pagoda. If he couldn't feed some part of the energy, then he'd scatter it around in his surroundings, such as his courtyard, and that of his third uncles, and Guanqing Han's. Due to this sudden influx of aura, the courtyards were actually still lush green, almost as if it was still the peak of the summer. In fact, some of the tree branches had even started sprouting new buds. Even though this quite bizarre, Guanqing Han was cherishing this new life in their courtyard. While this phenomenon was quite abnormal, she was beginning to care about these new buds almost as if they were a priceless treasure. The winds were rising inside the Tianxiang city, so Jun Moxie was obviously under tremendous pressure. In fact, pressure can be a very powerful driving force. And so, Jun Moxie was forcing himself since he wanted to be prepared for this unpredictable change in climate, which was now approaching the Tianxiang city, and wished to be strong enough to brave through this upcoming turbulence in weather. He had always been a lone wolf in his previous incarnation, and would always act freely. However, his circumstances had changed now, and he was no longer alone. He was now burdened with the protection of an entire family. He could still act freely and remain unaffected by the fate of his family, but having an entire family supporting his actions would fuel his ambition further. In this world, power and influence were very eminent and necessary factors. Jun Moxie had personally trained 300 men in the past, and now they would all come in handy. For the first time, Jun Moxie was going to work with a team. For the first time, he was going to be a team player. Just as grandfather Jun was developing his own army's strength for the uncertainties of the future, Jun Moxie had also started secretly training his own. He needed decent men. Otherwise, what would a handful of silver and gold Xian fighters be able to do in the face of a storm? It takes a real master to overcome a storm. In case of mediocrity, it's just better to give up. But if the servant becomes a top-level expert, then would I be able to keep him in control? Jun Moxie scratched his head. And suddenly he remembered something that he read in his previous life. Even the heroes of this world bow in front of great men and follow them with utter devotion. They remain loyal to such men. And this is the basic foundation of any organization. If I can portray myself as a great man, then even the supreme divine Xian experts will follow me loyally. How wonderful! Jun Moxie scratched his chin and smiled crookedly. He held out the 3 invitations in his hand and started thinking about accepting the second prince's invitation. The place of the meet with the second prince was obvious, Chang Pavilion. He had been there once on an eavesdropping mission and was well aware of Lady Yuer's deep-seated hatred for the Jun family, which now beginning to linger in his mind. If this woman finds out that I'm there, then she'll try to get to the bottom of the situation, and then she'll try to cause trouble. But then again, Jun Moxie had been presented with an excellent opportunity of meeting the second prince, and he simply didn't wish to let it slip by. There are, according my calculation, a long time had passed since the incident regarding the Xian beast tendons and crossbows. And even though grandfather looked into the matter, we still haven't heard anything new. Anyway, the second prince had organized a nice banquet along a beautiful river, which Jun Moxie obviously didn't mind. As far the other distractions and attractions of the locality were concerned, Jun Moxie wasn't even remotely interested in them. I'll go to the Chang Pavilion today. Jun Moxie was beaming a radiant smile as he stepped out into the courtyard. He was completely prepared to blatantly tell his grandfather that he wished to visit a brothel and would require a couple of bodyguards for protection, a couple of his best and strongest bodyguards. Just as stepped out of his room, he saw Guan Qinghan sitting in the courtyard, dressed in a snow-white robe. She looked at him coldly as he approached her. "Where are you going?" "Well, I'm going out to the Chang Pavilion." Jun Moxie replied honestly, almost as if there was nothing shameful about it. "The son of the emperor has invited me for a meeting there, so there's obviously no blame attached to my head, right?" Shameless. Now you've even started acting so boldly about visiting that shameful place. I thought that maybe you've straightened up. But no, you just put on a false robe. You're betraying the trust of your grandfather. Guan Qinghan's face was flushed with rage, and she was already unwittingly leaning forward, ready to teach him a lesson. Just look at this guy. He was only acting to be upright for a few days, and now he's even started boldly stating that he's visiting a brothel to fool around. He's so annoying. If he wasn't my brother-in-law, I wouldn't have tolerated his nonsense. Jun Moxie ignored her angered remark and laughed as he said, "Sister-in-law. In fact, I think you look even prettier when you're angry." "I'm just saying the truth. Really." Guan Qinghan's face went cold, and she charged towards him without saying anything further. "If I don't teach this kid a lesson today, then he'll just go back to his old ways. Anyway, I won't let him go today. I'll teach him lesson and then I'll drag him to the grandfather's chambers." Jun Moxie quickly ducked and dodged her palm, and then smoothly slid his feet and distanced himself from her body, and smiled. "Later, sister-in-law. Right now I have an important appointment. I'll practice with you once I return. But right now someone important is waiting for me. Bye." Then Jun Moxie ran out. He could tell by her heaving chest that she was quite angry with him. Jun Moxie would have told her the truth. The second prince was indeed waiting for him at the Chang Pavilion, but then again, Guan Qinghan hadn't really given him a chance to explain. She had just naturally assumed that he was visiting a prostitute as always. How could she not have flowing into a rage then? This kid had just started turning a new leaf. I will not allow him to degenerate into that scum again. If I let this happen, then how will I show my face to my in-laws and his deceased brother someday? Guan Qinghan bit her lips and quickly started walking towards Grandpa Jun's chambers. Jun Moxie was quite amazed with his progress. His physical actions had become so subtle that he could barely believe it. Some time ago, if he was encountered with Guan Qinghan's anger, then given that he can't attack her back or kill her, he wouldn't have been able to dodge her easily. In fact, it was awfully hard for him to control his urge to kill her in combat. But right now, he had been able to dodge her attack very easily. In fact, it had happened almost instinctively. And then, the other day, he had managed to dodge a Sky Xian's attack and had also managed to strike him without killing the man. Even though the man hadn't expected the retaliation and wasn't exactly ready to defend either, the fact that Jun Moxie was able to counter, and that too without causing a fatality, was undeniable. Previously, Jun Moxie didn't have the ability to do these things, but now these things were beginning to happen naturally. Was Jun Moxie even aware of his own progress? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 128. Talking big, Jun Moxie frowned thoughtfully when he recalled the incident at the Huanghua Hall the other day, and the massacre that he had staged. In his previous life, Jun Moxie was unstoppable because of his superior skill set. But in this world, Jun Moxie's current skill sets and strength weren't enough to be the best. The Xian Qi cultivation system of this world, ranging from the first 9 levels to Silver Xian and all the way to Supreme Divine Xian, were all very clearly labeled out and very distinctly organized. However, the art of unlocking the heavens was a very unique and mysterious ability, and seemed somewhat weird when compared to the general Xian Qi cultivation standards. In fact, it felt wrong. According to what Jun Moxie could make out, if this mysterious ability was as good as he was assessing it to be, then there was no need to go through all the pains and hardships that a martial artist takes to become a Xian expert, and still ends up being a meager silver or gold Xian. After all said and done, even a silver Xian expert, in fact even a silver Xian peak expert, was nothing in front of Jun Moxie, since he could kill the man with a snap of his fingers. If the first layer of the Hongjun Pagoda was able to give him so much power, then at this rate of progress, assessing Jun Moxie's strength after unlocking the second layer would be astronomical. How strong would he become then? With these thoughts in mind, Jun Moxie was beginning to realize that he needed to find out more about this world. After all said and done, this world was completely different from the one he originally hailed from. Grandpa Jun wasn't home, so Jun Moxie called out 2 guards on his own authority and ordered them to accompany him outside. After all, he was going out for a meeting with the second prince. And if the other party had any malicious intentions, then it was important for Jun Moxie to appear well defended, since walking in alone would be inviting danger. Guan Qinghan was a little late to arrive at Grandpa Jun's chambers and saw that Jun Moxie was already on his way out at. She immediately turned around and rushed to find Jun Wuyi, still angry at Jun Moxie. Jun Wuyi was about to give out his first order as the master of the house. He would be sending out his most reliable soldier after the girls and boys who had escaped from the Huanghua Hall. But instead of giving his first command as the master of the house, and relishing the power of his position, Jun Wuyi was sitting in his wheelchair and was pondering over his nephew's words. Previously, on the way back from the Huanghua Hall, Jun Moxie had demonstrated superb hiding and anti-tracking skills, which gave an indication that he had achieved this expertise after a serious amount of training and experience. After returning to the Jun residence, Jun Xie had been trying to recall Jun Moxie's words, actions, movements, and each time he'd replay the memories in his head, he'd realize that he had missed something the last time around. Later, Jun Moxie had said, "My practice is in my instinct. I do not deliberate to practice, but I still practice all the time." This one phrase had been lingering inside Jun Xie's head ever since, and he hadn't been able to get it out of his head. This phrase was quite reasonable. In fact, it was a very simple fact. If practice was ingrained into a person's instinct, then why would the person need to do it on purpose? But could this ever be done? And what kind of result was possible? But then again, Jun Xie had personally seen Jun Moxie in action, and was aware that Jun Moxie's expertise and skill set was far superior to any man he had ever known. Even though Jun Moxie was still just a youngster, his achievements in the realm of martial arts were already worthy of being turned into an immortal folklore. Jun Xie's face was carrying a grave expression. Since Moxie can do it, then why can't I? Am I that useless? Simultaneously, Jun Xie also knew that if he wanted Han Yanyao's family to acknowledge their mutual affection, then he'd need to adapt Jun Moxie's style of training. In fact, this was his best hope. Jun Xie's mind was completely muddled with such thoughts, but he hadn't realized that this one idea would take him on the path of greatness. Although, this moment was just the beginning. Jun Moxie was able to do this type of practice since he had been trained in this fashion in his previous incarnation, and the art of unlocking the heavens was a little different from Xian Qi. Qi and blood flowed through his meridians together, as a fusion. On top of that, the Hongjun Pagoda continuously emitted qi to help him support his practice, which was quite difficult to achieve for ordinary practitioners. But Jun Xie was unaware of this truth and believed that it wasn't impossible to achieve it since Jun Moxie was already doing it. In this world, although energy and qi were similar in functionality, their inherent nature was quite different. Circulating Xian Qi was a difficult and dangerous task, and the effects of negligence could be very violent, and even lethal. So much so, that if Xian Qi was allowed to run harmoniously with natural functions of the body, then there was even a chance that the body might end up getting possessed, and the practitioner may end up suffering a very tragic end. This was the reason that practitioners were so prudent and cautious while conducting their practice, and made sure that they weren't being disturbed by outside elements during their practice. However, Jun Xie was already considering going against this norm, which could be considered as a major change in ideology. In fact, just by daring to take on this task, he had already won half the battle. Sounds of quick and crashing footsteps fell onto Jun Xie's ears, and he could tell by the sound of the footsteps that the owner of the feet was in an enraged state. "Qing Han, what are you so angry? What happened?" Jun Xie tried to guess the identity of the person. "Uncle, Jun Moxie, that little brat is getting out of hand now. Today, he boldly told me that he is going out to visit the Spirit Fog Lake's Ching Pavilion." Guan Qing Han roared angrily. This anger was obviously directed at Jun Moxie, since Guan Qing Han sincerely respected both the elders of the family, namely Jun Zhantian and Jun Xie, even if the latter was a physically disabled cripple. "What about it?" Jun Xie wasn't even a least bit surprised. "Ah. What about it? This isn't a small matter. He had just started walking on the right path, and now he's going back to his old ways. And?" Guan Qing Han was still raging with fury. "Oh, that's something that I know about. I allowed him to go." Jun Xie was finally waking up from his personal thoughts, and hence replied in a soft voice. "Even you knew about this? But you still allowed him to go there?" You. Guan Qinghan's eyes widened in shock. And suddenly she was eyeing Jun Wuyi in rather confused manner, unable to understand his reply. Qinghan. You are mistaken. The second prince invited him for a talk. And as chance has it, the prince requested that the meeting be held in the Spirit Fog Lake's Ching Pavilion. Jun Wuyi smiled warmly. Qinghan. Mo Xia has actually become very sensible now. Sensible. Guan Qinghan was somewhat dumbstruck. After all the years of watching Jun Mo Xia undertaking all kinds of nefarious tasks, which were an indignation to all civilized laws under the heavens, it was hard for her to interpret that Jun Wuyi could call that debauchee very sensible. I suppose I was mistaken, but I understand now. Still muddled, Guan Qinghan whispered, sighed and turned away. It turns out that I have a lot to catch up to. Yes, there have been a lot of changes, and you'll naturally need to bring yourself up to speed. Jun Wuyi stated lightly as she was leaving, and he once again immersed himself in his new form of practice. Guan Qinghan's footsteps paused for a moment, but then she continued to walk. Jun Wuyi sighed and whispered, Uncle Pang, please come in. Lao Pang quickly came in and stationed himself in front of Jun Wuyi. Uncle Pang, I have a task that requires your assistance. Jun Wuyi rubbed his face with both his hands. And it seemed like he was having a hard time in making the final decision. What is it? Please give me your command, Third Master. Lao Pang's face was solemn. This was going to Jun Wuyi's first command as the head of the family, and no matter what, Lao Pang would want to execute it to perfection. There was news from the ministry offices that a large group of disabled children have escaped from the Huanghua Hall. Pitiful. Jun Wuyi had finally made up his mind. You please investigate how many of them are alive, and use the family's resources to help them set themselves up for a better future. They are still just kids. Yes. I'll get to it. Lao Pang finished and turned around to leave. If you can do this secretively, then do not expose your identity. If you face any obstruction, then please reveal that it was done upon my orders. Jun Wuyi looked up, and his eyes reveal a hint of sharpness. Ching Pavilion. The huge third floor of the building was almost empty, and only a very few people were leisurely sitting there, dressed in graceful attires. Accomplished scholars, middle-aged businessmen, some youngsters, even if their clothes weren't expensive, their actions were enough to reveal that they all belonged to high-class social backgrounds. Heir, Jun Mo Xie is nothing but a debauchee and a spendthrift. Heir, there was no need for you to personally come and greet that boy face to face. But now that Heir is present to grace him, that kid will start talking big. The speaker was approximately 20 years old by the looks of it, and looked rather pale. His body was extremely thin, and his hands were leisurely swaying a hand fan. Even though his identity was unknown, it was obvious from his body language that this person belonged to an influential family. Brother Heir. There is no need to meet Jun Mo Xie face to face. As younger brother just stated, Jun Mo Xie is nothing more than a debauchee and a spendthrift, and completely incompetent otherwise. As for the other aspects, he is completely useless and is of no value to us. But yes, he does have a powerful family behind him, so we should rather focus on the elders. Like Jun Xie maybe. The speaker was in his 50s or 60s by the looks of it, and spoke his words in a slow pace. Even Jun Xie is no good. What is he really? The younger brother chuckled in disagreement, although Jun Xie occupies a high position. But in terms of Xian Qi levels, he just a sky Xian expert. At best. That's it. If you wish to send him to the heavens, Then I could request my father. And he could swat him aside like a fly. This remark made the second prince sit upright in his chair. And his eyebrows suddenly wrinkled. He frowned and replied in an angry tone, "Just a sky Xian. That's it? Even if you tear apart this country, how many sky Xian experts will you find? Although you are lucky to be born into a large family, which has a lot of advanced Xian experts. But after all said and done, the Jianghu family's strength is nothing compared to the military might of the Jun family. Perhaps if you had considered that, then you would have known that Jun Xie could swat your father aside like a fly if he wished it." Please subscribe to this channel, so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 129. Ni Chang Pavilion. As for your father, although I've never met him in person, but according to the rumors, he's also just a sky Xian expert. Even if your father and Jun Xie fought head-to-head, there's a good chance that your father might end up losing the fight, and along with it, his life. So to think that your father could wipe out Jun Xie with ease is overstating it, more than just a little. However, the youngster's father was the head of a reasonably powerful family, who had only recently invested his troops in the second prince's cause. The second prince couldn't say this out loud since the man's family was of considerable importance at the moment. But as for the youngster, he was no importance and had no major talents. In fact, the youngster was an out-and-out idiot, who nevertheless gave himself too much importance, and carried himself with an "I'm the greatest in this world" attitude, and usually looked down upon everyone else. Although he was only at the peak of the silver Xian, he carried himself with the attitude of a supreme divine Xians. The second prince had brought him along since he, like Jun Moxie, was an outright debauchee, and the prince was hoping that if these two birds of the same feather managed to flock along, then the prince's motives might find an easier path. But judging his present attitude, the prince was beginning to get worried since he felt that his arrogant attitude might end up messing the whole matter. Sitting adjacent to him was another man. The man was wearing a very depressed look on his face, and was sitting on his chair in a very awkward manner, with his legs opened wide apart. This man was Lord Lu, who had previously jumped into the lake's waters in pursuit of a mysterious man. During the pursuit, he had been struck by a bamboo pole, which crashed straight between his legs at a thunderous speed, causing him to adapt this weird posture. Lord Lu would probably never be able to get over this humiliation. These days, Lord Lu only had two hobbies: frantically attempting to get his condition cured, and wantonly arresting people to find his culprit. But he hadn't been able to see the mysterious man's face, and had only been able to see a white, round ass. So anyone who was arrested under the suspicion of being the mystery man had to undergo the same procedure. They would be brought in front of Lord Lu, and then their pants would be stripped off their bottoms, for inspection. Due to this, the prince had been hearing several rumors about Lord Lu. There has been a major change in Lord Lu's S*X drive after his injury. Moreover, he's only showing interest in buttocks, and only those of young men's. Moreover, Lord Lu seems to fancy white-bottomed young men. As a result, every time a young subordinate was in the presence of the Lord, they'd inevitably try to cover their buttocks with their hands. In case Lord Lu took a fancy to their plump and round buttocks, then how would he ever be able to call themselves a man again? Yi, the third young Master Jun has arrived. The hall's door opened. A tall and gracefully stunning beauty walked in, adorning her face with a gentle smile. Her tall posture, equipped with her big and proud breasts, and a slender waistline, turned to face the road beside the lake, where a small palanquin was leisurely swinging its way towards the pavilion. Lady Yuer pointed towards the people around the palanquin. Yi. See those men? They are old faithfuls of Jun Xie. So I'm certain that the man inside must be Jun Moxie. That's one ugly-looking palanquin. The second prince couldn't help himself. The young Master Jun has a very unique taste. Very unique indeed. Ah. He's nothing more than a typical debauchee and a spendthrift. Lady Yuer's eyes suddenly flashed a cold essence. But she quickly resumed her smiling expression and said, Yi, would you like me to go down and personally receive Jun Moxie? You? The second prince's face was somewhat sullen, but upon seeing the firm and staunch look in Lady Yuer's eyes, he sighed and said, all right. However, he must not feel unwelcomed. Hi. Yi, Yuer might be cheap, but when it comes to making men feel welcomed and important, very few people can match me. There's a reason my services cost so much. Lady Yuer smiled as she confidently gazed at the red palanquin from above. Well. The second prince tried to smile. Below, Jun Moxie jumped out of his palanquin and landed unstably on the ground below, staggered a bit, spat on the ground, looked upwards at the sky, and sneezed. Then, he rolled his neck around once, hammered his back twice, shook his arms, tilted his head, and started walking shakily like a crab. He was wondering inside his head, this second prince is going to have a very bad day. Jun Moxie stepped inside the Chang Pavilion, took off his hat, and started to fan himself. Then, he looked sideways, and entered into the reception area, and asked one of the attendants, is the second prince here? The second prince is waiting for your grace on the 3rd floor, inside the feather hall. The attendant informed respectfully. The feather hall? With all the N*ked ladies? Jun Moxie quacked out a couple of laughs. The second prince surely knows how to pick a place. Well, he's won me over already. Then he started to embark up the staircase. The attendants were wondering about the prince's choice of company now. The second prince has asked this man to meet him in person. How much longer do we have bear this pighead? But really, second prince, wow. How could the second prince be dining with such people? Haha. Moxie, my younger brother. It's been such a long time since I last saw you. You look so refined and cultured now. This is amazing. The second prince affectionately stood up and energetically waved towards Jun Moxie. It's surely been a while, second prince. Jun Moxie seemed flattered. How could Moxie dare to refuse if the second prince calls him for a banquet? Oh, there's no need to be so polite. The second prince hurried along and extended his hand to greet Jun Moxie, but couldn't help feel a sense of unhappiness and surprise as he stood there with his hand extended, his lone hand. This guy didn't do any customary bows in salutation, and on top of that, he is even refusing to shake my hand. That too when I'm offering respect first. Jun Moxie of course didn't greet him respectfully. In his head, even the emperor wasn't worthy of his worship. In fact, if the god descended to the world, then would Jun Moxie have worshipped him? Jun Moxie wasn't awfully sure about it either. So then, what respect would he have for a mere prince? In the eyes of Jun Xie, the assassin, the prince was just another living body, which he could transform into a corpse at any time. Haha. Let's just throw aside all formalities. After all, our families are friends of old. The second prince smiled graciously. I remember that we used to play together quite often as children, but now that age has caught up. Now my younger brother and I can only look back at the past and marvel at the days gone by. The second prince's words had a hidden meaning behind them, and it seemed as if he was trying to remind Jun Moxie that he shouldn't act very high-headed in front of him. And the prince was only greeting him since he belonged to the Jun family. He was still the blood of the king, a prince, and Jun Moxie was just a high-class noble. Ah, yes. Jun Moxie quickly assessed the situation and replied. Such trivial matters aren't worth spoiling this broth over. He couldn't help but notice the 4 other people who were eyeing and assessing him from the sidelines. Especially the youngster whose eyes looked full of contempt and disdain. The second prince is asking me to befriend this pain in the neck? What kind of a man is this guy? Little brother, let me introduce you to some of my friends. You probably know some of them. The 4 men got up from their seats as the second prince gestured towards them. This is my teacher, Hongwen University's great scholar, Fang Bo Wen. The second prince sounded very respectful. Fang Bo Wen stroked his beard as he looked at Jun Moxie. Then he smiled and said, Nah, I'm just an old man. And nothing compared to you youngsters. Really. A renowned university scholar indeed. Jun Moxie looked at the old man, and could feel that he'd need to be on guard against this man. This old man didn't seem ordinary, and in fact seemed to be concealing a huge amount of qi inside his old body. Could such a person really be the prince's master? Or a scholar from the Hongwen University? He certainly has a history. This man is Lord Lu. Lord Lu is a master of the pen and the sword, a very rare breed of talented men. The second prince smiled. Jun Moxie looked up and down the body of the man who had caused him to run an *ked on the streets, and had almost ripped him to pieces. Then his eyes suddenly revealed a look of interest as he asked, Lord Lu has a very unique way of standing. Gee, he's standing so tall, even with his legs open so wide. Jun Moxie didn't expect that his opening sentence would actually expose the man's scars. Lord Lu's face was suddenly flushed red, while his mind was replaying the incident which had led to his awkward posture. The young master of the Jun family is indeed very different from his peers. And very handsome. Far too handsome. Lord Lu smiled as he tried to conceal his embarrassment. You think so too? I wonder why I'm so handsome. I'm too handsome to be true. Other handsome men always envy my looks. You and I could become really close friends. Confidants. I'll take you out for drinks later. Jun Moxie coquettishly swept his hair back, and then shook his head. Instead of shying from the compliment, he had brazenly accepted it, and in fact was also appreciating his own self. Everyone was left standing dumbstruck. They had never witnessed such narcissism before. Lord Lu was looking even gloomier now. You arrogant little snob, you think I'll ever desire to befriend you? Third young Master Jun. You deserve your reputation well. I admire you already. Haha. I'm Cheng De Chao. Jun Moxie reset his eyes to the speaker. Cheng De Chao's face was grimaced with an arrogant smile, and it appeared as if he was half a measure away from stabbing Jun Moxie. Cheng De Chao. Never heard of you. Jun Moxie directly waved him out. Who does this guy think he is? D***it. He looks like he wants to stab me. I'm your daddy when it comes to that. You puny little jerk. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 130. The Outrageous Debauchee. After hearing the young Master Jun's words, Cheng De Chao's face had gone completely pale with anger. Oh, young Master Jun. The young Master Cheng belongs to a smaller family than the Jun family, so it is quite possible that you may not have heard of him. Fang Bo Wen's eyes had been glued to Jun Xie from the moment he had entered the room. The old man was constantly observing Jun Xie's every action and word. Cheng De Chao. Is that right? Jun Xie lifted his gaze and looked at him with a side glance. Recognized expert? Cheng De Chao's entire body was trembling with rage at this point. He gritted his teeth. Young Master Jun. I've heard so much about the reputation of family, especially about your father's military prowess. I too was almost unable to recognize you by your demeanor. Cheng De Chao's words were quite tricky, and it seemed like he was implying that the young Master Jun's parents hadn't taught him any manners. This was a direct assault on the young Master Jun since he had lost his parents in his childhood. Everyone was quite surprised by Cheng De Chao's sentence, since this one sentence would not only expose the scars of the young master, but also the entire Jun family. The second prince knew that if Jun Xie interpreted these words correctly, then the entire Jun family might turn against his cause. In fact, at this point, the second prince was already praying that the pig-headed Jun Xie wouldn't understand the true meaning of these words. The gods obviously weren't siding with the second prince today. The assassin Jun Xie heard those words, snorted and replied, "So the young master Chang is a recognized expert. Apologies. This is the first time that we've met each other and I was being so rude to you. So please allow me extend my greeting as an exemplar of my etiquette." So, Cheng De Chao. Speaking of family, how's your mother? Jun Xie intentionally raised his tone as he said that last part. Now, everyone was blankly staring at these two men. It was obvious that the two men were on the verge of squalling since they had already started greeting each other by their mother's name. How could a man be so shameless? Everyone was truly amazed to meet their guest for the evening. They had heard that he was the most outrageous debauchee of the city, but meeting him in person was another experience altogether. Cheng De Chao's hands and feet went cold with rage, while face turned ashen. He was faced with a highborn like Jun Xie at the moment, but the personality of the man in front was no more than that of a bully, and the bully was hurting his family's pride, which wasn't a very small family either, and was brimming with experts of all levels. But after all said and done, no matter how much strength the Jianghu province had at their disposal, they were still no match for the political and military might of a superfamily like the Jun family. In other words, even if Jun Xie's attitude was unbearable, Cheng De Chao simply didn't have enough might to challenge him. Insulting the ancestry of the Jun family would be asking for a slaughter. Anyway, everyone knew that the younger generations of such powerful families often tend to run their mouth without thinking twice. At the moment, Jun Xie's eyes were red with rage, and he didn't even make any efforts to control his anger. If Cheng De Chao replied back in rebuke, then everyone knew that the Jun family's soldiers would wreak havoc, and this trivial incident could lead to the extermination of the Cheng family. Therefore, even though Jun Xie could freely criticize his counterpart, Cheng De Chao would have to show some restraint. Anyway, even though Cheng De Chao wasn't the smartest person around, he wasn't the biggest fool either. And even though he already despised Jun Xie, he didn't insult him back any further and concealed his anger behind random chattering. The others who were watching from the sidelines were drawing entertainment from Cheng De Chao's plight. Why is this guy provoking Jun Xie? Even if he is a debauchee himself, he should have known better, and shouldn't have provoked a third-generation young master of the Jun family. For all this pride on being a recognized expert. If he deliberately provokes Jun Xie again, then he'll learn the lesson of his life. Just then, a burst of sweet incense filled the atmosphere, and gentle voice chuckled and said, "Honorable guests, please allow Yuer and her sisters to add some fun to your meat." Then, 5 or 6 elegant and graceful women came into the room, All of them were young and all of them were beautiful. Most of them seemed a bit shy, and got scared the moment they saw the infuriated men in front of their eyes. Just as the women made their entrance, Jun Moxie's domineering and arrogant attitude quickly changed, and his eyes readjusted to the women who had just spoken up. He made no attempts to conceal the perverted intentions of his heart. In fact, his eyes were already exhibiting an abundance of obscenity, while his mouth was hanging open with saliva trickling down from the corners. A long asleep force seemed to have awakened. Jun Moxie had half accepted the second prince's invitation since it was being held at the Chang Pavilion, which meant that he'd get to meet Lady Yuer. Otherwise, why would he accept the invitation so quickly? Now that she had actually appeared in front of him, he wouldn't let the opportunity slip by very easily. Everyone saw the change in his expression, and couldn't help but despise the man in their hearts. What kind of morals does this man have? Lady Yuer might be beautiful, but she's still a prostitute. It isn't right to be involved with such women. Is this why the young Master Jun is called the biggest debauchee in the city? The second prince's eyebrows wrinkled. His interest in Lady Yuer was no secret, and even though Lady Yuer had read his heart's desire, he had always kept her at an arm's distance. But the second prince's heart nevertheless itched to get closer. Given his identity and position, he couldn't marry her. In fact, even taking her as a mistress would not suit a man of his position, and so he couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness in keeping his distance from her. A transparent pearl curtain separated the two sides of the room. Lady Yuer gently smiled as he approached from behind the curtain, and leisurely sat down. She brought out her lute and started playing it, and suddenly the vulgar environment of the room transformed to a very elegant one. Food and wine were brought in at the prince's command, and even though the prince constantly kept offering the items to Jun Moxie, it seemed that the young Master Jun had turned a blind eye to everything, except the body of Lady Yuer, which he was constantly staring. The prince and the other men felt disgusted. Everyone already knew that Jun Moxie is a debauchee, but no one had expected that his actions would be this absurd. His reaction to the insult on his family was expected, but no one had ever expected that Jun Moxie would act so shamelessly towards women. The second prince started the discussion. At present, the capital has several large and small families. All of these families are looking out for the actions of their counterparts, and are constantly attacking and defending against each other. At the time when the prince finished this sentence, Jun Moxie was in the middle of nodding in agreement with something. Good. The second prince came under the impression that the young Master Jun was in agreement, and felt inspired to continue, but then found himself cut midway by the young Master Jun. His Royal Highness is right. But Lady Yuer's ass is so full and round, must feel really good. And it's certainly quite strong too. I feel like rubbing it. The second prince choked mid-sentence, almost as if he had swallowed a housefly. Next, Fang Bo Wen and Lord Lu made their attempts to solidify the prince's statements, and even though they weren't direct about it, they tried to indicate that the Jun family's strength might be important to their matters, and prayed that the pig-headed debauchee of the Jun family would understand their meaning. As for the things that everyone was discussing, it seemed as if the prince had heard about the issues from his elders, while Lord Lu and Fang Bo Wen seemed to be speaking from experience. Jun Moxie, however, had only read about them in books. The young Master Jun's soldiers were also participating in this discussion, and seemed fairly knowledgeable. They were listening to the discussing very carefully and were participating in it very actively, making the discussion very lively, but still maintained a serious attitude. However, whenever the young Master Jun opened his mouth, he'd end up saying something out of context, and would leave the other people dumbstruck and uncomfortable. Formidable Wen took the lead on the subject of political strategy and techniques of governance, and stated that the strength of a nation is its financial power, meaning that the nation would need a strong financial backbone. Everyone agreed. But at the moment he said the phrase, Jun Moxie suddenly picked up interest in the conversation. That's right. The elder is right. Very good Haha, but speaking of money, reminds me of gambling. Wow haha, your brother here went into the 1,000 gold hall with Fatty Tang in disguise. And played the most amazing bet that day. I even earned the name, God of Gamblers. But I've not been able to meet any worthy rivals after that amazing and famous battle. It's gotten so lonely now. I mean it's so lonely at the top. Jun Moxie smugly stood up and looked disdainfully at the rest of his company. He put one foot on his chair and started making gestures with his hands, whether it a beast fighting a beast, or snake fighting, or dog fighting, or cock fighting. Oh, you don't know, in cockfighting, when the cocks, their hair. As Jun Moxie carried on bragging unrestrained, his saliva scattered in all directions, but he was speaking like a true expert. Jun Xie had the memories of the greatest Debauchee, so when it came to these things, no one could match his expertise. Even though the young master Chang was a known debauchee himself, he was nothing more than a mere infant in front of Jun Moxie's experience. Even though the man despised Jun Moxie, he couldn't help but reluctantly submit to the man's supremacy in these affairs. Everyone raised their eyebrows and enjoyed the show for a while, but it still seemed as if someone had struck them with a bolt of lightning. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Yuan Tang Yuan in disguise? No matter how well disguised that Fatty Tang is, anyone can recognize him in just one glance. You can search the entire Xian continent and you'll never find anyone with a bigger belly than that man's. So you and Fatty Tang went in there and won a lot of money? Of course. You're the god of gamblers. But where did that even come from? Oh God. Let's not stray from the topic again. The second prince was already repenting to the point of killing himself. If he had known that this would be result of calling Jun Moxie for a meet, then he wouldn't have spent so much effort in the preparations. Only Formidable Wen was paying attention to Jun Moxie. In fact, he was still observing Jun Moxie's every word and every action, even though he found the young master Jun completely unbearable. Suddenly, he discovered one thing, one very interesting thing. And the old man's body trembled as his eyes solemnly looked up, and a faint hint of a sparkling light lit his eyes up. This story will be continued to chapter 131. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.